Hi everyone and welcome to another video. Today I wanted to share with you the books that I read in the month of November. You might see that the lighting is a little bit different. I got a ring light, and that means that I can now finally film videos after when it's dark outside, so after work, which for my planning is great because it means that I'm not restricted to the weekend when I also have other things to do. So I read 6 books this month. 2 I've done separate reviews for, so I'll try to be short right now if I can manage. One is The Evening and the Morning by Ken Follett. This is a prequel to the Kingsbridge trilogy that now apparently is a series. This one, as the other Kingsbridge books, follows the exact same structure. They're set in the Middle Ages. This is historical fiction. We follow 4 characters mostly. One builder that is very intelligent and good person all around. A strong female character who is also very righteous and wants to be able to lead her own life. Then we have got 2 religious characters, one of which is very corrupt and is striving for power, and another that is good and just wants to share the love of God. In this one, however, in this book, they evolve in the Dark Ages. So the world is very small, whereas with the rest of the series, every time, because we progress through the Middle Ages, each book has a jump of 200 years. We see that the world has grown, and in this one the world is pretty small, but still we see how in the neighborhood surrounding Shiring the power structures function, and who says what, and who decides and who doesn't decide, and what the forces are in play. I really like this one. It's a biggie. I bought this one after having listened to the audio because I liked it very much and I wanted my collection to be complete, and I would absolutely recommend it if you also like the other Ken Follett Kingsbridge books. It is in keeping with the other ones. It's not worse or better, it's just good, and it's a lot of fun to see the Dark Ages in England at that time and what it meant for slavery, what it meant for religion, and the role of women, etc. So, good book. Enjoyed this one. The other book that I made a separate review for was Ik ga leven by Segou. My review is in Dutch because this is a Dutch book that has not been translated. By the way, both reviews will be linked upstairs, up in the cards and down in the description. So this is non-fiction, and it talks about Segou's life growing up in a very conservative Turkish-Dutch family in Amsterdam. And Lala really likes her freedom, wants to be an academic, she wants to study Dutch, but her family does not want that life for her. They want her to marry a Turkish boy, they want her to wear the hijab, they want her to come home and care for the family and do household tasks, etc., which is not at all how she wants her life to be. And the biggest problem for her is how her life in this community is very different from her brother, just because he's a man, and she talks about her struggles with that. It's a very emotional book. She's very, well, not necessarily emotional, but there's a lot of emotion in the book because she's 20 or 21 when she writes this, and she's still living in that family, in her family, and still living with this. So you feel a lot of rage in this one. And you see her age also a little bit in the writing that still feels young. There are complicated words used for no apparent reason. The book doesn't have an enormous structure. It's not really going somewhere. There is an important message, how difficult life is when you're growing up in a family that does not necessarily has the same values as you. But it still feels very young, and I would recommend Dutch people to read it if they're interested, but because of the conversation surrounding what it's like to grow up in a very conservative family. I am afraid, however, with this book that a lot of people are going to interpret it as being, see, the Muslim culture, we should force them to change, and that is not what the book is about, at least in my eyes. So I would recommend Dutchie to read it, even though the book itself isn't that great. The other book that I want to talk about is Segu by Marisconde. I'm really happy that I finally got to this one because I've been wanting to read it for a while now. It's the first book in a duology, and they're both pretty big and pretty dense. This one has 500 pages, but it's written in a very small font and the pages are completely full. So the book is set in Segu the city, which now would be set in Mali, and it's the capital city of a small kingdom that at that time, so it's the beginning of the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, this Segu, the Bambaras, are ruling that part of Western Africa, and they're ruling it through fear and war and stuff like that. And we follow this city through a family, through the main paterfamilias and a couple of his sons, legitimate and illegitimate. One of the sons decides to convert to the Islam, although the usual religion at that time is fetishism, so that brings a lot of tension. A couple of other sons also, because they're not the firstborn, have a difficult standing and are sent to places. There is one son, the last, his mother had been kidnapped from another ethnicity, and so he's seen as being less as well. So you see all of that. One son is kidnapped and then is sent to Brazil as a slave. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of depth, and you get to know the different ethnicities a little bit. It's hard to read when you know nothing of it, because then it's a lot of information, and I mean, you see a name and you don't know whether it's a place, whether it's people, whether it's a food, so that was complex at time. Luckily there is some information at the back, and also the family tree was very helpful. I really like this book because it taught me a lot about the time that I know little of in a space that I know very little of, at least the combination of the two. Slave trade is also still happening, and you see also how that was at the time and who decided who went where, etc. And the rise of the Islam is also a thing. My problem with this book, despite it being very dense, which isn't a problem, but which was something that I struggled with, was the role of women. At this time, basically the role of women was to carry kids, and you were the property of your father until you became the property of your husband, and all of that goes with it. And I missed a little bit of commentary on that. There were strong women, but they completely accepted this role in my eyes. There is one older woman that doesn't really accept her becoming the husband of her, no, becoming the wife of her husband's brother when her husband passes away. That's the only real tension that you have. And there were two women, that's my biggest issue, that were raped, and either at that time or even before being raped fell in love with the rapist. And that just, I struggle with that. I think that is nearly a problematic thing, also especially because it happened with two, and rapes are pretty violent, and then having two of the women then falling in love with their captors and, you know, afterwards being like, oh, I want to marry him, blah blah blah, and one does end up marrying him. I thought that was very hard to read, and I don't know, didn't really agree with it. But the rest of the book I felt was very well researched, and I appreciated it. I don't think I'm going to read the second book because it was hard to read. It's complicated because on the one hand what I appreciated was learning about this context that I know so little of, and these places and these people, etc, etc. On the other hand, that made it a very hard read. It was work to get through it, and I don't know, I think I'd have to be in the right mindset to get to the second one, and that's not going to be soon. The next book that I read was If We Were Villains by ML Rio, and it is a dark academia book that was a lot of fun to read. It follows a group of theater students that play Shakespeare theaters. Shakespeare is their life, basically. They're 7 and they're 4th years in this very arts-focused school, and they're always typecast. Some of the 7 of them always get the same roles, and therefore they also always start acting the same way in their own lives, in this friends group. And one of those people is called Richard, and he always gets these angry male kind of roles. He's always the star, but he's also a diva. A nasty diva, we could say, and that starts being a problem within the group, especially when at one point he doesn't get one of those roles, and he's so angry about it, and he starts hurting others, hurting his girlfriend, and things start to escalate pretty quickly. And I'm not sure, and I'm not going to spoil the thing that happens, but it builds up towards a point and then nobody can go back from there, and you've got this system of all of these friends that their world was put upside down, and they're angry, they're sad, they don't know what to do with all of their emotions, and it's a very tight-knit, nearly sect-like group, so you've got lots of complicated stuff going on. It was a lot of fun. The characters were, you know, very clear. The tension buildup was very nice. Yeah, we enjoyed it very much. It's really one of those great autumnal spooky kind of books with tension that I enjoyed very much, and I would recommend you read it, especially if you liked The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is kind of like the little brother of that, and it really made me want to read The Secret History again. In a similar vein, I also read My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This one is kind of a Lolita turned around. It's about a girl that starts to realize when she's about 30 and the Me Too movement is going on, she starts to question a relationship that she had with one of her professors when she was 15. And the book kind of goes back and forth during the time when she was 15 and growing up a little bit, and the time when she's 30, and start asking herself these questions because there are some people that are saying that her professor molested other girls. And that brings up a lot of stuff for her. You really see how the relationship that she had with the professor, the very much sexual relationship, how that influenced the rest of her life, and that was really one of the things that I appreciated. At the beginning, the book has one layer and you just see how this young girl is groomed by her teacher, but as the book progresses you see all of the effects that that has on her relationships with her parents, on her relationship with friends, on the self-worth that she has, on how she viewed this relationship, on how she viewed him. It grows and it grows and it grows, and I really appreciated all of the layers that it added to it. The thing that was very well done was making Vanessa not a character that you like. There are very little moments where you feel pity for her, which I think was a very smart move, because it's a thing that you expect really quickly when you hear one of these stories. You feel pity for those girls, and I think this was a very interesting twist. I really appreciated this one as well. It was quite harrowing. There were some parts at the beginning that were a bit graphic, but this is one of those books that I appreciated for the layers that it added to a thing that we all have a very quick opinion of, but that goes so much further than what we could think. So I really appreciated the book for that. After all of these somewhat heavier topics and books that were kind of hard to read, whether it was for the topic or the way it was written or just the tenseness that they had, I really appreciated my last read of the month, and that was The Reading List by Sarah Nissha Adams. This was a joy to read. It was very heartwarming. So it's about mainly two characters who discover a love for reading. She lives at home with her mother and her brother, and she has a complicated life because her mother has some problems, and she works at the library despite not liking books. And one day an old man comes. He's the second character whose point of view we follow, and he has lost his wife a couple of years before. She is a very avid reader, and their granddaughter is as well, and he decides one day that he wants to build up a relationship a little bit more with this granddaughter, and therefore goes to the library, on the one hand because he found a book and he read it and he liked it, and so he goes to the library to find something else that he can also then share with his granddaughter. Now shortly before that, the girl, or at that moment, can't really remember, around that time, the girl finds a list of, I think, 8 books, and she decides to start reading at least one of them and also recommend that book then to him, and they slowly make their way through the list, and you see a little bit of what the reading does to them, how it makes them open up, which was wonderful. You see them growing relationships more with other people in their family, especially the older man, how he starts to reconnect with his daughters, who are very busybodies, and just, they have a role in his life in the sense that they call him every day and then leave a message on the answering machine, but that message is always like, eat and clean and we're coming over and stuff like that. It's not really conversation, so seeing him grow and seeing him find his relationship with his daughters again is wonderful, and also his relationship with his granddaughter, and how at the beginning, you know, she's just a teenager who just wants to read and doesn't want to go to her grandfather's, but then it evolves and she starts loving her grandfather and they share books. It's wonderful. The 8 books, a thing that helped is that the 8 books, I knew them. I haven't necessarily read all of them. I think there's only one that I haven't read and also didn't know the story of, and the others I've either read or at least knew the story, and it helps. It's wonderful when you see these characters on the one hand fall in love with reading, but on the other do that through books that you also know. So she reads the book and then talks about it, and you're like, oh yes, yes, I know this, I know this. But that's great. So I'd highly recommend it. It's really one of those heartwarming, especially, I was thinking about this a little bit, but us book lovers, we love reading books about people who love to read, and people who love to read are often in our books, because I kind of assume that authors are often also people who like to read, so they're going to put that in their books. In the same way that I think in movies, proportionately, you're going to have more people that love movies. I mean, it's our bubble. It's so it makes sense that a book that is about book lovers would work for us book lovers, and that there are relatively more book lovers in books than in real life, if that makes sense. Tell me if you followed me. Please tell me if you didn't follow me. Anyway, those were the books that I read. I think I'd recommend most of them. Is there one that I wouldn't recommend? No, I think I would. I mean, Segou is definitely the hardest one. The reading list is definitely the easiest. I think If We Were Villains as well, but they're very different. One is heartwarming, one is a lovely tension. So yeah, very good reading month, and I'm looking forward to having another one of these. I mean, I found a couple of great books. Not awesome, but you know, great. And some of them I'm still kind of thinking about in my head, which is always good. I'll see you guys in another video. I'd love to hear if you have any recommendations that are like If We Were Villains or the reading list, because I absolutely love those. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.